So, hello everyone. My name is Regine Villena, a BSIT student from Southern City Colleges. For today, I will defining what is plagiarism, types of plagiarism, and some history of plagiarism. So, for today's, there are many types of there are many definition of plagiarism. So, and we will look at some of them in more detail below. So, however, according to resources at plagiarism.org. So, the things that immediately come to mind as description of plagiarism are, the one first is turning in someone else's works as your own. So, that's the one. Second thing is copying words or ideas from someone else without giving a credit. So third, failing to put a quotation marks. So the fourth, giving incorrect information about the sources of the quotation. So the fifth one, changing structure of source without giving a credit. And the last one is copying so many words or ideas from a source that it makes up the majority of your work, whether you give credit or not. So that's from the plagiarism.org 2006. So according to research. So when we say plagiarism, it's stealing others people's words or ideas and passing them off as your own. So plagiarism is a serious offense. At the university level, it will usually get an F, which means fail on your assignment. So if you plagiarize repeatedly, you may even get kicked out of the institution. So outside the academy, the penalties vary. Being caught plagiarizing certainly hurts your reputation. You might lose your job. So, but you shouldn't obey the law, just avoid getting caught. If you value original thought, personal integrity, and scholarly research, then you will naturally want to avoid plagiarism. So, that's why it's important to cite your sources and know how you integrate quotation properly. Okay? So, to plagiarize, is to include someone else's writing. So, information or idea in a paper and fail to acknowledge what you took by indicating whose work it is. So, in other words, it is not giving credit where credit is due. So, plagiarism is both moral and ethical offense and sometimes is a legal one. So, let's proceed to examples of plagiarism included. First one is copying another person's actual words without use of quotation marks, source citation, or the footnotes. So the second thing is present another person's ideas or theories in your own. So the third is failing to acknowledge contribution and collaboration from others. So the fourth one is using information that is not common knowledge without citing the source. The fifth one, submitting the downloaded papers or parts of the papers, or cutting and pasting. So, or paraphrasing or copying information from the internet sources without proper acknowledge of source. So, next we proceed to history of plagiarism. So, history of plagiarism is most of the religious texts were authorless and were freely copied and incorporated into later works. So even the word scholarship meant demonstrating mastery of the ancient greats. So this behavior tends to change during the Renaissance, when original scholarship became more respected in individual. So accomplishment was recognized in many more fields that it had been previously. This started when painters began signing their works. So by the mid of 16,000s, accusation of plagiarism and stealing ideas were common in every creative field, including the sciences. The first English copyright law was passed in the year 1709. So it had as much to do with protecting the rights of the publisher against book piracy as it did with protecting the author's rights against unscrupulous printers. So, but authors' rights developed very quickly. So, James Boswell, better known as Samuel Johnson, biographer, was a lawyer who argued one of the important cases over the how long copyrights lasted for an author and his or her heirs. So, it was 20 years at the time. So, by the beginning of the 19th century, the concept and the law were very similar to what they are today. So, even footnotes were being used in a form of very similar what they are today. So, what has changed since has been issue of enforcing copyrights across the borders. Most European countries included agreements to prevent book piracy. The United States was the odd man out and refuses to give any protection to foreign authors and publishers until 1891 and didn't sign on to the Berne Convention until 1988. So next, we proceed to types of plagiarism. So with respect to the gravity and frequency of plagiarism, a survey of scientific researchers has produced a ranking of plagiarism types. While complete plagiarism represents the most serious offense, paraphrasing is the one that is the most common. So it is thus very important to consider and understand all the various types of plagiarism, how they occur. So first, the first type of plagiarism is the complete plagiarism. So what is complete plagiarism? So complete plagiarism is the most severe form of plagiarism where a researcher takes a manuscript or study that someone else created and submit it under his or her name. So it is equivalent to intellectual theft and stealing. So source-based plagiarism. So the second thing is source-based plagiarism. So plagiarism may occur because of the different types of sources. So for example, when a researcher references a source that is incorrect or does not exist, it is a misleading citation. So, plagiarism also occurs when a researcher uses a secondary source of data or information, but only cites the primary source of information. So, both these types of lead to an increase the number of references sources. So, this in turn increases the citation number of the references. So finally, data fabrication and falsification are also forms of plagiarism. So data fabrication is making up of the data and researchers' findings. So while data falsification involves changing, omitting data to give a false information. So omitting data to give the false impression. So the consequences of this type plagiarism can be grave, particularly when it comes to medical research. So because it can adversely affect clinical decisions. So the next plagiarism is what we call direct plagiarism. So what is direct plagiarism? Direct or verbatim plagiarism occurs when an author copies the text of another author word for word without the use of quotation marks or attribution, thus the passing at is his or her own. So in that way, it is like complete plagiarism, but it refers to section rather than all of another paper. So this type of plagiarism is considered dishonest and it calls for academic disciplinary action. So it is not as a common, but it is a serious infraction of academic rules and ethics. And auto-plagiarism, also known as plagiarism, or duplication happens when an author reuses significant portion of his or previously published work without attribution. So thus, this type of plagiarism is most likely to involve published researchers rather than university students. So the severity of this kind of infraction is under debate. So, depending on the copied content. Many academic journals, however, have strict criteria on the percentage of authors' work that reusable. Okay? So, many journals manuscript through plagiarism detections software before considering them review. So, the third thing is paraphrasing plagiarism. So, that's the third one. So, what is the paraphrasing? So, this is as published on really the most common type of plagiarism. So, this is involves the use common of someone else writing with some minor changes. So, in the sentences, it is using one's own. Okay? Even if the words differ, the original idea remains word differ. Okay? So it remains the same and plagiarism occurs. Because students often do not have a clear understanding of what constitutes plagiarism. So there are recommendation for research and writing available reduce the risk of paraphrasing plagiarism. Okay, the fourth one is inaccurate authorship. Inaccurate authorship or misleading attribution can happen in two ways. So, in a one form, when an individual contributes to a manuscript but does not get credit for it. The second one is the opposite, when individual gets credit without contributing to the work. So this type plagiarism, whichever it occurs. So it is a violation of the code of conduct in research. It is also possible to commit this form of plagiarism when someone else edits a manuscript leading to substantive changes. So in this case, the recommendation is to acknowledge the contributors at the time of publication. So even if they are not listed as authors. So the fifth one is we call mosaic plagiarism. So what is mosaic plagiarism? So mosaic plagiarism may be more difficult to detect because it interlaces someone else's phrases or text within its own research. It is also known as patchwork plagiarism, and it is intentional and dishonest. So the sixth one is accidental plagiarism. Accidental plagiarism, whether intended or not intended, no excuses of plagiarism and consequences are often the same. However, plagiarism may be accidental if it occurred because of neglect, mistake, or unintentional paraphrasing. So students are likely to commit accidental plagiarism. So university should stress on the importance of education about this form of plagiarism. So there are some of different types of plagiarism that are common in research community. So how many of these have you encountered? So how did you deal with them? So please share your thoughts with us in the comment section below. So thank you.
Good day, everyone. My name is Michael Bellarmino of Group 7 with the topic of plagiarism in the Philippines. Plagiarism is defined as taking someone else's work, be it literature, art, design, technology, or an idea, and representing it as your own original work. In many countries, plagiarism is literally defined as stealing as fraud because it involves claiming, misrepresenting, and profiting from someone else's hard work. In the Philippines, there is no formal anti-plagiarism law. This is evident in the mountains of fake Louis Vuitton bags, Class A Air Jordan shoes, and knock-off Victoria's Secrets perfumes in the markets and malls everywhere. Plagiarism in school is also rampant. Almost everything nowadays is completed with Control C, which is copy, and Control V, which is paste. Versus plagiarism in the Philippines is Republic Act 8293, which is the Intellectual Property Code of the Philippines. According to the Department of Justice, plagiarism is only punishable as crime if it constitutes a copyright violation or infringement under the Intellectual Property Code (IPC). For example, when a person uses graphic design without permission from the original artist to sell T-shirts and profits from the said sales of the T-shirts. This is both plagiarism and copyright violation. The Intellectual Property Code carries a penalty of 3 to 6 years of imprisonment, a fine of 50,000 to 150,000. Copyright and related rights, trademarks and service marks, geographic indications, industrial design, patents, layout designs of integrated circuits, and protection of disclosed information. The intellectual property rights serve to protect two aspects. One, the creative integrity, direction, and image of creators, and two, economic rights that allow them to derive financial gains or reward from their work or the use of their work. The IPC law seeks to protect and secure the exclusive and intellectual property rights of scientists, investors, artists, and other gifted citizens to their intellectual property and creations. The IPC also seeks to streamline administrative procedures for registering patents, trademarks, and copyright, to liberalize registration on the transfer of technology, and to enhance intellectual property enforcement in the Philippines. The world revolves around various laws that serve us as a reminder between what is right and what is wrong. We are compelled to not only know about this law, but also to follow them. Plagiarism is both legal and a moral wrong. We must always afford creators respect for their work. Thank you.
Hey guys, I am Normia Sabdani. So this time, I'm going to discuss how to avoid plagiarism. So most of the writers get into trouble because they have taken certain passages that they likes. So they don't really paraphrase it all. So they don't really paraphrase all the content that they have got on the internet. So they might even cited it to the original source, and they did not change the paraphrasing to become their own idea. So now I'm going to discuss the 5 ways to avoid plagiarism. The first is paraphrasing. So what does paraphrasing means? Paraphrasing means it is putting someone else's work into your own word instead of coding directly. Paraphrasing can make complex information easier to understand your study. The second way to avoid plagiarism is cite. So, we need to cite sources when we are using either the words or ideas of someone else. If you don't cite the source, then you can be accused of plagiarism, which is a serious ethics violation for writers. So, including citation is the author, the date, the title, and the additional information. So, third ways to avoid plagiarism is the quote. So, you can introduce the quote with full sentence after the colon. Well, that is one of the example on how to quote. And the fourth ways to avoid plagiarism is the referencing style. Well, referencing style gives you a set of rules that you should follow when you are referring to others' thoughts, works, or ideas. So, if you have somebody's work, you need to credit it for that people. So, when we are referencing, it included in-text citation. So, what is it in-text citation? In-text citation, it is giving references within the text or within the body of your paper or your research or article. So, the last ways to avoid plagiarism is citing your sources. Citing your sources means acknowledging that the material is not your own. So, that's what